Hi, everyone. My name is Conyee Chan, and thank you, AAU School of Architecture, for having me here. I'm here to share my journey as an architect with you all. Here. Great. So there's a few different definitions of what an architect is, and I kind of like the last line. The architect is a deviser, maker, or creator of anything. So kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Missouri, United States, but I moved to Taiwan, this tiny little island in Asia, when I was very young. And I actually grew up in this environment. It's basically a class of 50 students, boys and girls, taking exams all the time. And then at age 12, I was transferred to another school. And I don't know if you noticed the difference. We were all girls. It was an all-girls boarding school. I went into the school without any expectation. I only knew it was a good school. And at the end, I was so surprised. I enjoyed every minute of it because I have someone to play, study, and hang out with me 24/7. I also realized that my personality started to change. I realized I was more outgoing, I was more confident, I was more assertive. There's actually a study that shows in some, single-sex schooling improves the performance of female students in science-related classes, but not in language classes, suggesting that reducing gender-based stereotype threat has real effects on academic performance. For me, it was very true. It wasn't just make a huge difference on me on academic performance. My personality basically changed. I was more outspoken, and I basically converted from an introvert into an extrovert. At age 16, my parents decided it's time for me to go back to the States to study. So I was moving to another all-girls boarding school because that was the only school that would accept me without lowering my grade because that's junior year in high school. And at that time, what were you doing? Everyone's applying for colleges. So when everyone was studying for their SATs, I was still studying for my basic vocabulary. It was very hard, and art became my sanctuary. And that also became the time I discovered my passion for art, and I decided to study for architecture. The challenge was very hard because I did not know the school system. It was very hard for me to apply for all the schools. And I remember the college advisor told me, she saw my list of schools, and she said, what if you can't get into any schools? And I was so surprised because she had no faith in me. To everyone's surprise, and to her surprise, I got into Cornell Architecture School. It was one of the best architecture school program in the world. And I was the only senior that got into Ivy League school in that year. However, the process to fit in was still very tough on me. We had not only tough program, we had tough weather, we had tough professors, we had tough classmates. And I remember one day I was calling my parents. I don't know if I can graduate. I don't know if I can do this one another 5 years. This is too hard for me. And my mother told me, don't worry. Don't do anything stupid, because Cornell had a very high suicidal rate. And, she said, I'm a professor too. I would never fail a student who works so hard. So I decided to work as hard as I could. I never missed a single class. And I started to get a hang of it after 2 or 3 years into the school. I started becoming TAs, working as a TA as well. And in 5.5 years, I graduated from my Bachelor of Architecture and Master of Architecture, which is normally a 7-year program. So my suggestions is, if you don't feel you fit in, create your own belief when nobody else believes in you. So next challenge. When I graduated from school, I thought I was so equipped, I was so ready to jump into the workforce, and the market made a turn on me that there were so few jobs and so few projects. I was working for this small little design firm in Soho, New York. It was all female firm with 5 women. And I remember the owner kept telling me, Connie, this is a very hard profession for women. You need to make triple the effort to be credible in this profession. So at one point, there was no job. So I decided to travel to Shanghai. Um, this is what Shanghai looked like in 1990. This is what Shanghai looked like now. I came to Shanghai about 2003, so probably only 1/3 of the building here was built at that time. Take a note of this location A and B. I'm going to talk about them later. So in Shanghai, as a tourist, all of a sudden I was offered a job from a Cornell alum. So I started to be trained as an interior designer. I would learn how to work on very high-end model homes, hotels, clubhouse. So it was a very interesting experience to design from a different perspective. So my suggestion is that create your own environment. Doesn't matter what happens to the market. Maybe the market in New York is bad, then move to another environment, right? So this is actually project A in my previous slide. After 2 years working at CL3, the interior design firm, I decided to join Alsop. Alsop is a visionary architect who won the Sterling Prize, which is like the Nobel Prize of the architecture field. I joined the Shanghai office, and while working at Alsop, it really changed the way I see design. I didn't know architecture could be actually so colorful, so playful, and so much fun. We were designing this like 8 office building along the Huangpu River. And we even have the Shanghai chandelier, basically 3 pots floating in the air because we have a tunnel underneath. So we decided to suspend it, the structure, floating in the air. It's something that I've never seen before, nor done before. So I had so much fun designing this firm. I love my coworkers because they all came from around the world. I was the liaison between the Shanghai office and the London office. However, another challenge came. Discrimination. I vividly remember my first meeting with the client, and the client never came into the meeting room. We had no idea why. Later, we found out it was because of our skin color. The client was not happy that the new team was a group of Asians working on his project. Luckily, I was still kept on the project. I worked with the client for another 2 years. And our design for some of the buildings never got approved by the client. So my boss said to me one day, Connie, come up with some designs. We can't, the designs from London just not approved. Let's get some design going. So I made a few proposals. And one day we presented to the client, along with Will Alsop's design, 3 other options. To my surprise, at the end, he said, Connie, I'll choose your design. You will be famous one day. That was a highlight of my career. Not because he chose my design, but because I changed his perspective. So I would say, create your value, prove your value. Doesn't matter what others think of you. Time will tell. So one day I found this interesting picture online. So I saw the warriors were visiting Shanghai, and they took a picture next to my baby. Later on, the same client knew that I had interior experience, so he gave me the other projects to work on the interiors. The pods were built, so I did the interior design proposals. And this is a shopping mall in Shanghai. Oh, sorry, in Xiamen. Basically, it's a mall next to a beautiful lake, and we didn't want to design a structure that's protruding out of the landscape. So we basically designed a landscape carpet to hide and create a park for all the residents in the city. So I want to kind of show you some snapshots of what life is like living in China. Living in a foreign country, it gets you exposed to a lot of different experience that you wouldn't have if you stay in your own comfort zone. So I was traveling a lot, visiting different vernacular architecture in China. I got to know how a communist country worked, and seeing a lot of amazing constructions. This was the bird's nest in Beijing for the Olympics. I also went to the Beijing Olympics in 2008. I learned how to sail, and I was having a good life in Shanghai, just like a crazy rich Asian. So another challenge came along, architecture license. I was 7 8 years into my career. I haven't taken any exams yet. What should I do? Because all these exams were only offered in the States. Should I quit my job, move back to the US? Should I just leave Asia, the land that I enjoy so much? So I decided to negotiate it with my boss to take a 3-month sabbatical. I picked the best 3 months of New York. I came back to New York for 3 months, enjoyed the fashion shows, family reunions, but also studied very hard for my exams. Since I only had 3-month time frame, so I took all 7 exams in 3 months. I did not pass all of them, but every single exam brought me closer to a pass. So do not afraid to fail, because every step you take counts. Also, create your conditions. Don't be afraid to create an environment that works for you. In 2008, my office also actually decided to offer me a position in Singapore. And I had no idea what it's like, because Singapore is just a little dot on the map, while China is like this big on the map. And but to my surprise, I actually love it so much. I only knew it's a very fastest growing city in Southeast Asia. This is what it looked like when I moved to Singapore, and this is what it looked like when I left Singapore. This is the Marina Bay Sands Hotel, one of the biggest casino in the world and resort center. I continue to work on a lot of amazing projects in the region. I was the lead architect for this live-work unit in Guangzhou. Then another amazing opportunity came around. I was offered to be the project director for the tallest hotel in the world inside the tallest building in China, Shanghai Center. The firm really needed someone with a China experience, someone that speaks the language and have the ability to communicate with the client. So it was an amazing experience to work with the best team, the best hotel operators, to come up with the first luxury hotel brand for China. And these are some snapshots of life in Singapore. This was the office. And I get to travel a lot in the region, diving, eating, of course. Construction site of the Marina Bay Sands. This was the view from my window. And get to visit orphanages in Indonesia. 2013, 2 of my classmates joined On, which is a firm with 1,000 employees around the world across 10 countries. So they were really looking for help to set up the Shanghai office, Shanghai new studio. So I joined 2 of my classmates and started a new office, new studio in Shanghai. We select the new office, we design the office, and basically running the day-to-day operation of the firm. It was a very unique experience for me, because then I really learned how to and understand how to run the business of architecture using someone else's money. So it was an amazing experience, and I was just at the height of my career. We're doing a lot of interesting projects across the region. However, just when I thought life couldn't get better, unexpected surprises happened. I was doing a health check in a hospital in Taiwan. I was on my way coming back to Shanghai that day. The doctor called me, And then he said, "Are you still here? Have you flown back to Shanghai?" I said, "No, I'm here." He said, "Can you come to the hospital right now?" I said, "What happened?" He said, "You're tested positive for terminal illness. Come to the hospital now for a second check." I was so surprised. I was like, how is that possible? How is that happening to me? Everything is just going well. So I went to the hospital. While I was waiting to see the doctor, I kind of have my life playing right in front of me. And I felt all my achievements, all the projects that I've done, all became meaningless. And I was looking around the hospital, all these families, friends, daughters carrying their with their mothers, mother-in-law with their sons, taking care of each other. And I felt like this is what life's about, isn't it? It's about relationship. It's about helping each other out when they're in need. I was just so focused on my career that I have no idea the priorities in life. So that whole 1 week, I prayed to God, please give me a second chance. And he said, I don't think I'm afraid to die, but I'm afraid to face God. Because I kind of have this conversation in my mind. God will ask me, so what did you do with the talent that I gave you? And I wouldn't know how to answer. I would just only say, oh, I designed the most luxurious hotel in the world. It's going to be a beautiful space. And then he would say, then who are you serving? And I couldn't answer because I know I'm serving only the top 1% of the world. So I kept on praying during that whole 1 week, waiting for the second result to give me a second chance. And thankfully, it was a negative. So life goes on. I had another chance. So within a few years, I flew to Uganda. I found EMI online. It's Engineering Ministry International. They basically, it's a nonprofit organization like Doctor Without Borders. They gather in volunteers from around the world in the architecture and engineering professions. So I specifically selected a project that's about designing a children's home because that was my thesis in college. I've done a lot of research on orphanages in different regions, so I was so happy to find a project that I can apply my research. This is their school in Uganda over here. So I would say, create your mission. Because when you complete your mission, then life starts to become meaningful. This is another project with EMI in Egypt. It's a training center for the deaf community. If you're hearing impaired in the Middle East, you're basically outcast because you cannot support yourself, you become a burden to your family and friends. So when we presented this design to the community, I saw tears in their eyes. They couldn't believe that a group of volunteers and professionals flew across the world to design a training center for them. This is another design we call the community flower for Sichuan earthquake when it happened 2008. So basically we converted containers into community facilities like libraries, clinics, showers. It's meant to be like a solution for people who lost their homes in a disaster storm. So in short, we are the architects and creators of our journey of life. What would you create? Thank you.
Honestly, truly, lots of things going on, and what a roller coaster. Thank you for sharing. I guess you could say best of both worlds in that respect. Leticia, if you have an introduction for us.
I don't have any specific slides per se, because if I put my projects on slides, I could go on all day. But just a little bit about myself. I'm also a classically trained architect. I went to SCI-Arc, Southern California Institute of Architecture. Really known for its design and experimental architecture. So when I first started school, I have a preconceived notion that I'm going to be a designer and I'm going to work in an architectural firm and, designing wonderful projects, and I will feel really proud of myself because I really do these really wonderful designs. And that's really what I did in the first, I would say, 10 years. I worked for different firms, boutique firms, large corporate firms, and, really everything from urban design to architecture, speculative housing, high-rise towers, and everything. But what I realized is that over the years, working in kind of a mixed environment of men and women really started in sort of an equal front in school. You have your peers in school, and everyone really basically has an equal voice. Everyone respects each other, in an ideal setting. But you would perceive your classmates, whether men or women, as equal ability. So when I went out in the first 10 years, when it comes to design, it's kind of a different thing. When you go out to the world, and I would speak about my professional experience, that, again, the clients and just the world overall has a, again, stereotype or preconceived notion what men are good at versus what women are good at. So in a way, they kind of limit you to a certain, project or design ability. So what I see over the years is that men will kind of get directed into kind of larger scale urban design projects and so on and so forth. And women would tend to get pigeonholed more into kind of small details. So interiors, hospitality projects, maybe some housing projects, but they would kind of lean towards interior design. So I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other, but you will see a divergence after a certain number of years, like let's say 5 years or so. You would see a large group of women on the interior design side, and then you would see the men with their golf playing, whatever, weekend entertainment, entertaining with clients, doing the big projects. And I had a problem with that. So when I worked for a large firm in Los Angeles, I worked for a firm called Johnson Fain. So one thing good about that firm is that you could switch. So I was placed in the interiors because I was actually pretty good at it. So I applied for the interiors department because that's the way for me to get the foot in the door. So I worked on a couple of interior projects, excel at it, and I got promoted to senior designer and managed my own projects. But I was not happy because I feel like there's not an equity in representation. I think women can equally do a good job in large-scale projects because we offer a different point of view in all different scales. So I in turn talked to the principals and everybody and got my experience in urban design and as well as architecture. So without really showing to the slides of what I did, then I actually developed an interest in sustainability. Because for me to really understand buildings, I work on beautiful buildings, high-rises, but there's one aspect about the form and how daylight affects it, but really all the systems and the performance aspect is really the backbone of the building. So I became really kind of intrigued by it. So I have really kind of diverted a path to choose to actually study it more closely. So, how can at that time I was unlicensed. I was studying for my exam, and I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go. But at the bottom line, I care about architecture. I care about, this discipline as a whole. So I still retain my path to pursue my licensure as an architect, but I chose to work for an MEP design firm. So that transition was really interesting because in terms of gender, when you go into an engineering firm, is 80% men and 20% women, sometimes less, 90% men and 10% women. So when you look at women in that company, what do? They're project managers, admin, HR, and nothing else. There might be one token woman engineer. There might be one kind of, electrical designer. And what I see is when women in a minority situation, just like Conyee said, you have to triple prove yourself that you're equal, you're capable, and you stand up for yourself. So I can tell you why that is. I think part of the reason is, again, how people, general, even women, tend to judge ourselves. That when you look at a face, oh yeah, she's in interior design, she cannot be the mechanical engineer. So there are really kind of preconceived notions of who we are, but that's not really true. We shouldn't set boundaries on ourselves. So as I move on, I work for an MEP engineering firms, and I subsequently became the director principal of sustainability. So I did a lot of very technical work on energy model, overall building performance, energy model, facade studies, and thermal comfort studies. So again, I believe those components are crucial factors in the experience, on how you experience the building. So I really had a very, very, really good experience in that. And I would say that, I kind of broke some glass ceiling in terms of, this course in, energy model. Because I don't know, I have worked with other firms, and now I'm in a different place. When I work with engineering firms, you rarely see an energy modeler who is a woman. Maybe some engineers are women, but very rare. So I'll move on. So now I am with actually the largest real estate firm in the world, CBRE. They have a project management group, so they service different clients. So I'm a dedicated project manager for Google projects. So I am basically on the client side now. So when you go into a meeting, it's a rectangular table. There's the client on one side. There's the architect and the engineering team on the other side. So I represent Google now. So I'm on the client side. So basically, when Google wants to do a project, they have a certain pot of money. They wouldn't have the resources and time to actually implement the project. So my job is to hire the architect, hire the general contractor, and all the consultants to make this project happen. So how do I get to that? It's kind of an interesting transition. As I went from architecture, kind of the beauty and certain aspects of really creating a space, to get to a more kind of performative aspect of building science. So that came around in kind of a holistic kind of package, in a way. I don't know how else to explain it. So basically, I was recruited as an overall good, have a well-rounded knowledge in architecture, MEP systems, construction, running projects, and that really fits Google's goals. So that's how I arrived. And I would say that, in general, that women in consulting roles, architecture, MEP, have some challenges. But when I get to the owner side, it's kind of interesting. because Google is actually very diverse. They have people from all over the world, men and women. But what you see again in construction is, more men, making these decisions on big projects, and you would see women in sustainability, on, say, healthy materials, on, what to spec for carpet, and all the kind of health and fitness, and kind of all the kind of tangible kind of benefits, aspects of, day-to-day running of maintaining and running the projects, the space kind of aspect. So in a way, it works well together, men and women. But again, I'm looking into hopefully kind of breaking that boundary and get more inclusive in each aspect. I would like to see women and men running big and small projects. I would like to see women and men talk about healthy materials, talk about indoor air quality, talk about daylighting, and all these aspects. So that's really me, kind of in a history in a nutshell.
Perfect, thank you. So, as you mentioned, you were interested in sustainability, and that kind of led you down the path of going towards project management and building analysis. Was that something that you were looking at possibly pursuing before? Was that something that you had been thinking about before you got interested in sustainability, or is that just kind of how the dominoes fell and,
I think it's a domino effect in a way. Sustainability and project management actually doesn't have to do with each other. But there's one more factor that I enjoy working with people. I like problem solving. So when you're in school, you don't really talk about, how to, I don't know, maybe how to solve certain problems. But when you run a project, every step of the way, there are challenges. So I feel like I love to help people. I like to solve their problems. And I think it has to do with my birth order. I'm the oldest one in the family. I like to lead everything. I like to organize everything. So that's my main job. I organize everything and orchestrate everything. That's really the primary function of being a manager, and make sure everything is on time, on schedule, and every contributor comes in place on an appropriate sequence and manner. So, yeah. So I think they go hand in hand. I feel like I could impart my technical skills and expertise and put it into a project management context.
A similar question to Connie. In terms of the variety of projects you've worked on, you said you worked on the more high-scale, high-income projects, and then you worked with low-income down in Uganda. And so what kind of have you learned from both of those wide range of projects, one kind of lower scale, one high scale? Anything in particular that has taught you about either one that you can take away from both of those super different experiences?
The biggest difference is budget. So you have to be super creative with low budget projects. For high-end projects, sky is the limit. A lot of the projects I work in China, actually, we never talk about budgets. And so that was a lot of fun. But at the same time, it's probably less challenging. So when I was working on the projects in Uganda, and it was super challenging, and that's also where I find interesting. Yeah.
In your
also, I think another factor is satisfaction. When you're serving the 1%, you felt that they've seen the world, the top 1%. You are just designing another beautiful place for them to enjoy.
It's not as impressive.
You're just another amazing project for them to enjoy their life. Whereas when we were visiting Uganda, when we were visiting Egypt, when we designed these projects for them, I saw tears in their eyes. They couldn't believe people like us would fly across the globe to design just for them, because they were viewed as the unworthy in their society. And people actually, they couldn't believe we actually value them and we want to improve their lives.
So in terms of where you both are working now, so a question for both of you, how would you, are you happy with kind of where you're at now? Is there any way that you would want to move forward with kind of pursuing the current career that you're in now? Not the career, but the work path. Anything that you'd want to change about what's kind of going on in your work field at this point?
So right now I work for Studio Tsquare. At the firm, we do a lot of multifamily and mixed-use developments. So I felt pretty honored to be in this process to help the Bay Area to build more housing and relieve the housing crisis. We also build a lot of affordable housing. Now I'm helping the firm to expand more into interior as well, and also design more senior housing. And that's really in line with my mission.
So for me, I feel like I'm in a good place. Like I mentioned, Google as a client is an amazing client, and they have a budget, but when it comes to spending more money to do the right thing, they don't hesitate to spend the money. I think that's really good and justifiable. And in fact, they have a mission to give back to the community, so a lot of their new development would emphasize on giving back, providing housing, providing public accessible spaces, retail, parks, and infrastructure for the public. So hopefully I could get to work on those projects. In terms of really where it aligns with my kind of life mission, I could see myself really, I'm going to work until the end of my life. I'm going to work until I die. But maybe in different ways. Maybe, in the next 10 years, 15 years, I would be a PM, for Google. But at the same time, I feel like I want to give back. That's why I am involved in the AIA mentorship. I do want to share my knowledge. I want to share, my experience with others. And I would love to listen and hear about other people's experience and struggle as an architect, whether men or women. So I really believe in giving back because I think just only practicing architecture is not enough. You have to really understand what you're doing, creating space, but it's really about the people. It's about helping people. It's about solving, maybe helping other people solve problems, and so on and so forth. I think that we have the power to do that, and we do have the skills. Once you guys, get out of schools and work in different projects, it's a worthy mission. But like Conyee said, it's a long road ahead. It's very hard, very long hours. And women certainly have extra challenges, and I could see that every year, every day. I see women leaving the profession because of family obligations. I see women doing triple the work because they have to prove themselves. And in family, they are expected to carry on more of a family kind of parental load. And I think it's a matter of influencing your generation of, your partners and so on, that really women and men should have equal responsibilities.
So you mentioned that you kind of see a lot of that gender inequality in your work that you're doing now and even coming up, and you even mentioned a little bit of that. Do you still currently see that in the work that you're doing now, Conyee?
No, luckily. When I was invited to speak at this panel, Women in Architecture, I actually talked to the organizer, Leticia. I said, I actually didn't experience any discrimination as a woman. Not really. Maybe because I was working in Asia. And then when I came back to the States to practice, I was so surprised. It's still a huge issue in the States. I kept asking myself, why? Why do women still have this kind of challenge? I was on the board of Organization of Women Architects in the Bay Area, and I joined the organization because I heard so many horror stories within the organization that I had no idea about until I came to the Bay Area. I thought those stories probably existed 3 generations ago, not like in our generation or the generation before. And so I kept asking myself why. How come I did not experience that? So I realized maybe it's because woman is still seen as the default caretaker of the family, whereas in Asia, everyone, you can hire a helper. So there's no reason why a woman has to stay home unless you choose to. Um, so I think that's the biggest difference between working in Asia and also in U.S. It was just to my shock that we are still, women still facing so many challenges in U.S., whereas the rest of the world has progressed.
That is definitely something that here at the school we don't have a whole lot of. Just within the school environment, the inequality between female and male students isn't present at all, but there is that jump from the educational level to the professional level. And I guess the question would be, how can we as students kind of prepare ourselves for that jump, being both male and female students coming into that workforce where that could be an issue?
I'm speaking from my own experience. First of all, set yourself up for success. So in your life, in your professional life, again, you have to prove yourself as equal to everybody, whether men or women. But also, I think in kind of a domestic or family setting, you also would set up a situation where you're also equal. So you don't set yourself up ending up having 3 jobs, meaning being a parent, being a full-time designer, architect, and a caretaker. So I would say that this is a conversation that has to be had within your future or near future. And part of it is really, really planning ahead. I know it sounds really practical, but I think is a criteria for you in order for you to be successful and not bearing the majority of, other kind of responsibility in life. So I really speak from my experience. I am a parent of a 12-year-old boy, and I'm happily married. My husband is also an architect. So we had it tough. I mean, it's really long hours and everything. So from day one, we said that it has to be equal. And that's the only way that it could make it work.
Did you have anything to add? It's okay if you don't.
No. No, I guess for us, we just do the best we can. Expect to win. The best defense is offense. Show the world that you can do better.
One of the main things that kind of intrigued us in your slides is the kind of variety of locations, environments, as you mentioned, where you've worked. What's kind of the difference in all these different places, New York, Shanghai, Singapore, that you've noticed in maybe the scope of work or how, the relationship between architect and client is, that kind of thing? What are those main differences in those environments?
Mm-hmm. I felt working as an architect in Asia, I felt we were being more respected. In the Bay Area, I felt clients come to you to find a solution, to help them fit their design into a box. Whereas in Asia, clients come to you so you can help them think outside of the box. Architects were really viewed as the creatives in Asia, whereas I feel over here, architects are viewed as the code follower. So it's a huge difference for me. I felt I was constantly inspired by architects in Asia because of the projects that they're working on, because of the wild designs that the clients are used to or they want to get from the architects. So it was a lot more fun working in Asia, and the pace was so much faster. The government wants to build. The city, the residents, they want to build. Different from here, the residents, they don't want another shopping mall next to them. Over there, everyone wants a shopping mall next to them because their property price would triple in a year. So it's a very different, almost like a night and day different mentality.
Do you have so I'm assuming you probably have a preference in terms of working in Asia is a little bit better.
But there's always a catch because you work all the time.
That's true.
That's why I moved back for a better work-life balance. When I was working in Singapore, I was constantly working after midnight, 3 a.m. It's very normal, yeah. But I loved it because I love my projects.
In terms of Leticia, you said that you are currently an AIA member. Can you speak a little bit about that, how you kind of got interested in AIA and how it has benefited your career?
So I joined AIA maybe about 8 years ago. I can't remember. So, a lot of professionals are kind of hesitant to join because of the high fees. So my experience, my takeaway is you get back what you put in. So when you join the AIA, if you participate in the events, you get involved in committees and mentorship group, you get a lot back. So for me, the biggest sort of takeaway or the kind of benefit of the AIA group is it really opens my eyes in terms of the variety and a gamut of professional practice. I've met men and women in really all these different kind of subdisciplines. So, some of these kind of subdisciplines you probably haven't even heard of because you're just in school right now. You're just like really busy trying to figure out how the site works, how to put the building on it. But man, there's so many related disciplines to architecture. So it really opened my eyes on what you can do with your education and going forward. You could really go creative, like Conyee here, really exciting, high-profile projects, and you could do high and low and give back eventually. And then you could also go really technical. You could kind of end up like me, really with the mission of helping people, helping deliver projects, kind of go into project management. Or you could go as specific as like specification writing. You could go into really all kinds of interesting discipline. So what AIA helps me is really, get me connected to those people and kind of open it up to the possibilities. It's in a way to celebrate architecture and celebrate this profession. So I think if you could afford it and if your firm pays for it, definitely join and be active in it. So that's really all I really have to say. And I would continue to be active in the organization.
So what are kind of some of the roles that you play? You mentioned that you're part of the AIA mentorship program. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the people that you work personally with, close hand with, and what are some of the roles that you play in the mentorship program?
So the mentorship program is pretty interesting. They have a launch kind of party or launch event. So people who are interested, they could come by. And then they have a quick match event where you just really, it's like a quick dating kind of thing. So you just show up again and you talk to people you're kind of interested. So I've done this a couple of times now. And what you find is that you just kind of naturally gravitate toward maybe people that you connect. And and you just kind of go with the flow. And what I found is that, there's a good spectrum of experience level from very junior to very experienced. I don't really see a lot of people in the middle. I don't know what that is. when I work in the architectural profession capacity, I was in charge of hiring of staff. I see a lot of challenges hiring people with a 5 to 10 year experience level. So there's definitely a gap right now of professionals within that experience level. I think people left for a profession, or if they're women, they might have left to, you know, bear children or whatever. Yeah. So it's a challenge.
So we've gotten a lot of great information from our two panel guests. We'd like to turn over the microphones to the audience. If anyone has any questions for our guests, they are definitely welcome.
Well, hi, thank you for coming today. And I just have a little questions because, like, you mentioned a little bit about how your balance between the personal life and work is a bit different in Asia and in the United States. And I just want to know a little bit more about it. So, like, and also for both of you, like, how is it different from the college life, and like, what would you suggest for people to kind of balance it better?
Well, in Asia, when we say we go home late, that's midnight. Here is like 7 p.m. That's the biggest difference. And the clients, they don't respect you to have a life. So clients here are actually so nice. They're very lenient. So I love the clients here. But at the same time, clients in Asia, they're a lot more open-minded to design. They want to design something different, same as the government. They want to do something different to differentiate the city to the city next to them. So work-life balance, but Asia was still very fun because I was in Shanghai and Singapore. These are the two biggest cosmopolitan cities. There's always events. There always are galleries, new restaurants happening everywhere, new concerts. It's just booming. However, I don't really get a sense here right now. So it's a very different kind of lifestyle.
So I would speak about, my experience during school. So this is your life right now. You work day and night and weekends, and really your studio, your design is your life. You're racing towards the deadline, have this spectacular project and everything. So that is your life. And plus some parties and whatnot. So as you transition out to work life, I actually see more clear-cut boundaries of, really, you have your job. You're given certain hours and you work. So I think in terms of personal and work balance, a work setting is actually better because there are actually boundaries. There are actually deadlines. There are actually some kind of limitations of what you're compensated for, because you can't possibly work until 2 a.m. every night. You'll quit, right? You'll get another job. But in school, there's no option to quit. So, well, you could quit, but hey, you pay for it, right? Whereas you go to work, others are paying you. So, but there are boundaries. So certainly, I think to begin with, in terms of boundaries, you just have to really kind of manage your work in order to achieve, a balance. So if your work doesn't have that boundary, don't do that work. It's not worth it because that is not a good employer. It's not worth your time to put into that job, because they should plan the job accordingly to allow for certain hours for work, and they should plan the deadline accordingly in order to really for you to work 8 to 9 hours a day. Or else your boss is a very poor planner, and you shouldn't work for him or her. Okay? So that's really the difference.
I think another big factor is on the employee side is you still have to be held accountable for the work that you're producing, not just on the employer side.
Yes, I agree. But again, it comes down to, experience and the planning aspect. But there are some nights that are really late. Yeah, there are 2 a.m.s actually, even in the U.S. I work for a very fast-paced firm, and the clients are all tech clients, Google, Facebook, and everyone. And people work until 2 a.m. And me as a project manager, I actually haven't been drawing in Revit for years now because they said, no, you're too slow. You manage now. You deal with the money. You deal with contracts. You deal with staff. You cannot draw. Even if I said, can I go to Revit training, please? They're saying, no, it's a waste of money. So what I found is that, yeah, people will work until 2 a.m. sometimes to meet deadlines, and I will be online, actually, at home. Like 10 p.m. I'll check in, and 12 a.m. I'll check in, because we are a team and we work together. So it's a team effort. You would find a balance somehow, but yeah, there are late nights, definitely. But it's going to be a radical change from now to the future.
How have you guys, because you mentioned that you've lived in Asia and then also here. I didn't hear about your history, but how have you guys transitioned from working in different countries versus like people, maybe somebody that chose to be like a traveling architect that just took contracts everywhere? Do you know the perks of staying in one place stationary or moving around, or your advice on that?
I guess depends on your life stage. There's no right or wrong. There's no better or worse. It depends on what you want. When I was working in Shanghai, we had this one couple. They were working in our firm, but every 6 months they moved to a new country and work in a different firm. So they're from Europe. Then they were in China. Then moved to Russia and the Eastern Europe and the Japan. So that's what they want to do. And then to me, it sounds really fun. But it's not for everyone. And you definitely experience something different when you move to a new environment, but you definitely experience a lot of different challenges. Some people embrace it, some people hate it. So it depends on your personality. But I love all of you to explore.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's very inspiring. My question would be about licensure, because I heard a lot when women get licensed, people view them like differently. Or it's just like there's this thing that happens when you get licensed. You're just more accountable, more responsible. So I think you're more, it's easier for you to get more in like a manager position or something like that. Did you guys experience that after your licensure?
For me, absolutely. And I wouldn't say it's night and day, but the fact that you could technically call yourself an architect really makes a difference in front of clients and contractors. And I would cite an example. I work on a very big project, and at that time, I was a sustainability principal, so I was on the MEP side. And there was the architect also on the table, and she was a very high kind of fluent designer and all of that, comes in with whatever designer clothing and all. But so it was an interesting incident. The moment that the construction manager found out she was not licensed, his attitude completely changed. So it was really an interesting occurrence. I can't speak of all construction professionals and all, but definitely you would sort of get more respect when you're licensed, especially as a woman. Because when you walk into a room, you see a guy, whatever dressed up, suit or whatever dressed up, and you see a woman. And even if they're same height or whatever height, you would tend to assume the guy was the architect or was the licensed professional or was the professional, and the woman is whatever. So it's really sad, but true.
Interesting. Very interesting for me because I got licensed when I was in Asia. And in Asia, as a foreign architect, you cannot practice as a local architect anyways. So we were always a design consultant. So to them, it doesn't matter if we're licensed somewhere else across the world at all. I knew some U.S. architects, U.S. designer practicing in China for 30 years without ever get a license anywhere in the world. License also mean very different things in different countries. In Europe, a lot of countries, once you graduate from architecture school, you're licensed, right? So in every country is quite different. In Asia, as a foreign designer, it's not so important to get your license, but I think it's a good training anyways to go through just because you know what it's all about.
Hi, thank you for coming. So you had mentioned when you were in school, like, I don't know if I could do this another 4 or 5 years. Was there any time within your careers that you kind of felt that same weight? And if so, what did you do to persevere and keep going?
Actually, I have to say that probably after I passed my first year in college, I loved every single course at the college. I actually loved it. I loved every single course. So the first year was really tough because I couldn't understand what the professors want. I understood the words they were saying, but when they put together, I don't know what they meant. So the first year was super tough that I did not know if I could live like this for another 4 or 5 years. But then I still start to feel I got a hang of it. And then I started to enjoy the process. And for career-wise, if you would let me choose again, I think I would still choose architecture. But I don't know if you let me choose again, I will still go abroad to have that experience.
Hi. This might sound a little irrelevant, but I wondered if you guys, for your daily life, if you take any me time as an architect, like family time, and how do you balance your family time versus working time as a woman per se?
Well, first of all, I see myself, of course, a woman, an architect, first and foremost. And for me, since my husband is also an architect, it really comes to an advantage because we speak the same lingo, the same language, we live and breathe architecture. So architecture is part of our personal life, professional life. We plan our trips around it, seeing architecture, seeing cool spaces and design. So I'm lucky in that aspect. But I'm not telling you should choose a partner that is also an architect. But certainly choose a partner who appreciates what you do and who you are.
I don't know if I'll ever choose a partner that's an architect. I probably need someone to talk to me about something else. I felt like being an architect in U.S. is not that bad. There's a lot of me time. There's a lot of time after work. In my perspective, sorry. Everything is relative. Yeah.
I actually have a question for you. So earlier you mentioned that when in Shanghai you got a project and the person didn't want to enter because you were Asian. How did you take that as a person? How did you take the critique as a person?
It was the most humiliating day of my career, right? No question about that. That the client did not even want to enter into the meeting room, and we had no idea why until the end. At the end, we realized the client was angry that he hired a British architecture firm to design his project, and all these Asian faces show up, even though he knew nothing about our education, our experience. We can only just prove ourselves to him. That's why it meant a lot to me when I changed his perspective, and he said, "Conyee, I'll choose your design after 2 years."
Thank you. Anyone?
me, it's like we like all students from different countries here, and it was like we have all different ages. Like I'm 46, starting my new career after like I was studying economy and finance. So and now like I would say it's like I love it. It's like this experience, and this is my last semester, so it's graduation, and and I have a question. Is like, what from your life experience, like as professional, your wise tips how to start career? Because I'm kind of like I would say, like being in school, it's wonderful. But being in real life, professional life, it's kind of like it gives me like butterflies. So I would love to hear from you, like what tips you can like recommend, how to be a wise professional.
So I remember when I was in grad school, and I had some classmates who were previously dentists or in some other profession, and they chose a second profession. So for them, it's an exciting starting point. And for them, actually, I just had my 20th year reunion. I know, God, really old. But we have 20-year reunion, and it's actually very telling on how people did 20 years later after school and all of that, and kind of what they went through. And the couple of students who have their second careers who actually go back to school for architecture did really well. For the fact that, first of all, they have the first career experience. They have the experience of working with people and collaboration and, kind of work in a corporate or kind of a really workplace setting. So that is already kind of 1/3 of the way that you conquer already. So all you really kind of have to pick up is really the skills and how kind of to do things or practice architecture in the real world. So I think you could be of a certain advantage if this is their second career. So I am happy for you. I'm excited for you that you're starting something new. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen software engineers that turn into architect. I've seen a chef turn into a designer. I think you bring in a different perspective to the design field that no one else had. So probably find an environment that you can still take advantage of your knowledge from before to apply.
And actually, at the AIA group, I met a 62-year-old woman who became licensed at 62 years old. So that is really inspiring. And that's her third career. Yeah.
Hi, thank you again for a wonderful presentation. I can have conversations with you guys all day, I think. But my question is, architecture as a profession is very slow compared to all the other professions around us with the startup age and these first generation millennials we have, and I myself am there. And you said that there's an age group and it's hard to find employees with 5 to 10 years of experience for that certain reason where people moved away from architecture. What do you think, based on your experiences, what do you think will be moving forward, still interacting people and engaging them into architecture and making them value as we move forward? And because at a certain point also, like, architecture is undervalued, as you were saying, by a lot of the clients over here or the people around who doesn't know a lot about architecture. Mm-hmm. So what do you think we as students can embrace from what you guys have experienced to make this change?
That's a very good question. I think that's also is a larger question that the profession is asking. But in my personal opinion, I feel that the profession really has to take care of themselves. they have to feel empowered and really share to the world that we as architects have value, that we offer, an expertise and, a certain really quality of service that no one could replicate. So for instance, by California law, you don't have to have an architect if you design a single-family house. You don't, even for multifamily housing up to 4 units, 3 stories, you don't have to have an architect. But so why do you hire an architect? Because we design better. We deliver better buildings. So I think as a profession, we have to empower ourselves to do that. And AIA certainly has a role. No more pretty videos or whatever, but I think AIA has to reach out to educate the public that architects are invaluable to shaping our world. So they have to, I think really they have to have some really accountable and concrete, quantifiable marketing message to the world. So not concrete, not saying that, oh, I look up and I see buildings. I don't see, that is not a really kind of concrete message. So, I think the next generation are empowering. The organization should also really empower. Also, just really root for more equity and really more reasonable pay compared to other professions. And I think part of the reason, a good number of people are leaving is you could make more money by doing programming, doing tech work, and you work equal amount of hours, and you get paid twice the money. So, I won't judge those people. Maybe, really different people, they really would need the money for a living. But yeah, I think that's, and also really work-life balance. So having more support for women and men for, in order to do their work.
I think everything is about supply and demand. I was surprised to find out that when I was in Singapore working as an architect, I actually made more than doctors. So, and I felt very valued working in Singapore and in Shanghai as an architect, that the clients understand good design would double your revenue. Good design would make the building worth more. Good design could attract more visitors. Good design can change the identity of a city. People could come from all over the world to see a building. That has happened a lot of times in the world, like the Bilbao Museum, like the Marina Bay Sands Hotel. So people value architects. Yes.
So what I wanted to ask was, when you do finish your bachelor's degree, there are some who go straight to working after that, but there are also others who go straight for their master's degree. And as myself, I do want to really get out there and start my work experience. But in other cases, I do want to continue my education and go for my master's degree. Would you think that, what would be the best option for me personally? Would it be best to continue on, go for my master's, or get a few years in working experience and then going back for master's degree?
I had the same question when I finished my Bachelor of Architecture. Cornell had this program. It's a fast track that you can stay for another year and you get your Master of Architecture. And I was not considering that option at all because I just want to get out of Ithaca. But looking back, I was actually glad that I did it, that I just spent 1 extra year that I get my graduate degree done and over with. However, I wouldn't suggest that to everyone because when you get out into the workforce after your bachelor degree, maybe you have a different idea about how you want to take your career. Maybe you want to study something a little bit different. Maybe you want to focus on real estate. Maybe you want to focus on management, project management. So there's no right or wrong. But if you feel that you're ready for the workforce, then go out and work for a little bit and see how you like it before you invest another year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that gap year of a year or two is invaluable for you to give yourself some time to evaluate the practice of architecture is good, whether it's for you or not. So I would highly suggest that, recommend it.
So during my master's degree, even though I was a master of architecture, I actually took a lot of real estate courses. So my master's degree was not just on top of my knowledge, on top of my architecture school. I actually had a different focus so I can learn something else to equip myself better for the workforce.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. If we can have a round of applause for our guests.